This episode is for the writer who wants to make sure that the reader will be on her side and know what she's thinking and what she's experiencing. Writing yourself as a character can be tricky because you can assume that the reader either needs explanations that are actually too much information, or conversely, that the reader can read your mind. Today, we're going to learn how to see yourself as a character and how to know when to trust your reader and when they need a little more handholding. Let's get started. You are listening to the Memoir Method podcast, the place for writers, readers, and anyone who appreciates the collective power of our stories. In this podcast, we explore the impact of memoir alongside an examination of writing techniques and strategies used in the genre. Whether you are a writer looking for inspiration and guidance or a passionate reader seeking meaningful connections through shared experiences, the Memoir Method podcast is your go-to conversation spot. I'm your host, Charlotte, editor, writer, and the heart behind Charlotte Writes. Let's get started. Whenever I dive into a new manuscript with a new client, I see this issue come up a lot. How they write themselves as the protagonist is muddied with how they write themselves as the narrator. And yes, your memoir needs both of you. Things I notice when the character version of the writer is underdeveloped are when I'm reading the manuscript and then ask myself, wait, what's going on? How can the author not see this? Like, I will see a plot hole or an obvious character flaw that the author does not seem to recognize. So I start to think that I know better than the author, that me as the reader is smarter than the character and the author. I start to lose trust in the narrator because the narrator does not seem to have insight into the flaws of the character. So you see how there are two different versions of yourself that you have to be aware of as you're writing. So here's an example. I started work with a writer earlier this year, and the manuscript that she sent over for me to read through had comments from another editor. While I'm not here to bash other editors in this field, I will say that this editor had no idea about the concept of a character version and a narrator version of the author. Some of her comments were directly criticizing the character version of the writer without realizing that what the manuscript actually needed was a stronger narrator voice. The author, after I finished her evaluation, was very aware of her blind spots as the character version of herself. She knew as the writer, oh, I should have done this differently, or had I known what I know now, I would have navigated this relationship differently. But that wasn't communicated well enough in what she had sent over to me. And the one editor that she worked with was almost cruel in her criticism of the character and of the author as a person. So what your memoir needs is a strong character development of yourself as a character. And you also need to assert your authority as the narrator of your story as well, who can look back and see, okay, yes, I know that this is not working out. I know what character me is doing wrong, but trust me, this will resolve. So to remedy this underdeveloped memoir protagonist, you just need to develop a stronger narrator version of you to guide both you as the character and your reader through the reading experience. So your narrator version is a person that your reader is going to trust, because there's a lot of reasons probably why the reader might not trust you as the character, because they can see your flaws and your characteristics that are sabotaging you, right? It's easier for a reader to see that. That's probably why you're writing this memoir, not because you've done everything amazingly, but because you've been through something that you think is going to help people. But the reader isn't going to trust that version of you. They need the narrator to help remind them, hey, it's going to turn out okay. So chances are that you as a character, you don't really have yourself together, at least not in the way that's going to make a reader feel taken care of. And so the reader needs to know that you as the author know that character you does not have things figured out yet. It's like, oh, I know that that's a problem. Track with me. So that's a primary role of you as the narrator. Remind the reader that you know what they're seeing and that the reader doesn't have to draw their conclusions on their own or pass judgments quite yet. It's, hey, trust me, this is going somewhere. So they don't have to fill in the gaps that way, if that makes sense. And this bumps into another quandary that I see writers grapple with. But I want my reader to know what I'm thinking. I have heard this a couple times with different writers over the past few months. I want my reader to know what I'm thinking. So many writers want to feel justified in their story. And you start out writing in part because you want to share your side of whatever story you have. You want to be seen on your terms with your narrative. You want to be known in a very specific way. And so you want to make sure that your reader will know exactly what was going through your head at any given time. So I'm going to run this through the lens actually of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So when Goldilocks falls asleep in Baby Bear's bed after she tries their food and messes up their chairs, she's woken up by the bears. She could say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so scared right now." Or she could jump out of the bed, her heart racing, and climb out the window, crying once she gets past the tree line. Which of those examples actually communicates how scared she was? Obviously, it's the second. She also could have said, "Oh, hello, bear family. Bet you didn't expect to see me, did you?" This look into her head is different from when she announced how scared she was. This line, "Oh, bet you didn't expect to see me here," that adds some intrigue. So we could add some inner dialogue, like, "Finally, the moment I've been waiting for." And that paints Goldilocks in a much more manipulative, villainous role. You actually start to wonder what's going through the bear's minds right now, right? Or instead, you could add some details about what her body felt like in that moment. She could have sworn her rapid heartbeat could be seen through her clothes, and she's darting her eyes around, wondering how she was ever going to get herself out of this mess. So we have the confident dialogue, like, "Bet you didn't expect to see me," contrasted with the fear state of her body. You're pulling in sensory details to an movement and action to communicate what is actually going on in her head. So if you want your reader to know what's going on in your head, yes, you can use dialogue and direct explanations, but only when necessary. You can use the scene around you to communicate so much more than you realize. A well-executed scene allows you to trust the reader to read into your character so much better than if you had to explain everything that's going through your head thought by thought. Now, it's not only boring, it also shows the reader that you don't trust them to make their own conclusions or to make the proper, correct conclusions. Here's another example. If you share a shocking piece of information with the reader, you don't actually have to share that you found it shocking. At least not every time, because you can trust the reader to track with you. Instead, you can show your response to that piece of information. What did your body feel like? What did you say to the people next to you? What movements did you go through after learning this shocking piece of information? Showing that will allow the reader to calibrate with you, whether you respond the same way the reader does or not. Your reader wants to feel smart as they're moving through your story. And because of that, they don't want or need everything explained to them. I will use the example of Tara Westover in Educated. And this is actually a book that I'm using as an example a lot inside of phase 2 of the memoir method. But in that story, she shares some pretty shocking traumas and events that happen, especially with her father and her brother. I mean, it's been a little bit since I've read the book, but she does not say, "This was shocking to me." She presents kind of shocking behavior, very out of the norm situations, and she allows the reader to make their own conclusions about it, which probably more often than not are going to track with hers. Yes, she maybe found that shocking, or she was hurt, whatever it is, but she's trusting the reader to make that conclusion without her having to say it. This is one of the biggest pitfalls that I see writers fall into when they feel the need to over-explain and then underdevelop a scene or a character. When you're writing for a reader and your memoir, remember, is not actually for you, it's for someone else, you get to practice both giving your reader the context and the information they need while also trusting them to pace with you. It's a fine balance. Sometimes I'll be working with a writer and I'll comment something like, "Consider infusing more emotion into this moment. The reader isn't clear about what you're actually feeling." And the writer will come back to me with, "Well, I just showed that in this paragraph." But the sentence is, "My best friend moved away and I was devastated. I couldn't believe this was happening. My whole world turned upside down in an instant." But this sentence, which is completely made up, by the way, I'm not quoting from any one of my clients. I just wrote something for this example. But the sentence doesn't immerse the reader or trust them to make their own meaning from it. The gap that I see too often is that what the writer has in their head isn't always making it to the page. Or they'll swing to the other end where they over-explain and don't give the reader room to think. So here's how I recommend revising that sentence. "When my best friend told me she was leaving, my world stopped. Here was the person who had lived with me during my darkest years, who had stayed by my side while I put myself back together. And now that hard-won peace I'd been fighting for years felt flimsy. The weight of depression cast a shadow over my mind. I felt like a weight dropped on my chest." "Chrissy, did you hear me?" she said. My head jerked up, and I realized that I hadn't even responded yet. "Yeah," I mumbled. "That's so great you got the new job. I'm really happy for you." I doubt my smile was convincing, but Jennifer gave me the benefit of the doubt and went off to call her parents. I was finally feeling like I had my life together, but with Jennifer gone, I didn't know how to hold the pieces in the right place all by myself. So do you see how different those two passages are? One is a bland couple of sentences about being devastated. The other is a couple of paragraphs that give insight, not just to the character's past, but also to her relationship to another character. This is what showing actually means. And what will make those paragraphs land even more emotionally with your reader is if before then you've developed Jennifer as a character, you've developed that relationship so that the reader feels that emotional tie between Chrissy and Jennifer, right? And so then when Jennifer says that she's moving, you already have the emotional investment to realize how devastating this is going to be. The writer doesn't need to say that. She's showing it through the relationship by building that relationship. And then in these two passages, showing kind of where her mind went and what her body did without needing to say, this was devastating to me. So you can use your physical responses and the actual scene to carry the emotional load more than you saying, I felt this way. So there's so much more that I could go into about this, but I just taught this concept in so much more depth inside of the memoir method just this week. And compelling memoir relies on you to write people well, including yourself. So I hope that this episode gave you a helpful starting point when it comes to writing yourself as a character. And if you want deeper education on this, you'll want to dive into the Memoir Method program. I'm in the middle of teaching phase 2, which is all about story structure, character development, and immersive storytelling. I want you to head to the link in the show notes and join me. This is a program that I haven't seen anywhere else. I haven't seen anything like this. I haven't seen this process anywhere else. This is what will take you from that overwhelm that you feel whenever you open your draft, the constant, never-ending revisions and cycling through and second-guessing every part of your memoir, to crafting something that is tight, that is emotive, that is impactful. So that is the Memoir Method. Please join me, and I will see you next week. You've just listened to an episode of the Memoir Method podcast. The Memoir Method podcast is presented by Charlotte Writes. If you liked what you heard, the best way to support the show is to subscribe through your preferred podcast player. And if you're feeling especially inspired, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Leaving a review really does help other readers and writers like yourself find the show. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on my website at charlottewrites.co or on Instagram at charlottejanewrites. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. And remember that you have a story that matters.